Round 5 of the F1 season and our return to China has been and gone. Max Verstappen is still winning races, Lando Norris still looks good, Mercedes still look awful, and Lance Stroll is, well, still Lance Stroll. However, as you'll see, it wasn't just Lance having the worst of races. There were some good, some bad, and well, some pretty ugly. I'd put the Lance Stroll clip back in here, but there's only so many times you can take the mick in one intro. But enough about Lance, let's let some other drivers show exactly what they did as we get into my race ratings for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. Starting off with my worst 5 drivers, and in this 5th worst spot, it's someone I did not expect to be putting here at all, and once I do tell you who it is, please don't click off the video, because it's Carlos Sainz. Now I know what you're going to say, what? Carlos? He finished 5th? Yes, I know. However, when you look at the course of the race as a whole, there are a lot of things that just weren't quite up to Carlos Sainz standards. For example, even with the safety car halfway through and on the same strategy as his teammate, he still finished 12 or so seconds behind. Not to mention there was a point where he tried to overtake Lance Stroll and got it so incredibly wrong. So for Carlos, with the standard he's set to start this year, I've got to say it's slightly disappointing. And given that there are a lot of drivers in this one who generally did fine, I have to say Carlos did slightly below average. And so for his rating in this one, he's going to be getting a 5. Again, it's not awful, just a little bit below par, especially for Carlos. Then we get into my 4th worst driver, and it's someone who's found home on this list, Logan Sargeant. Don't get me wrong, this wasn't the worst of his races. We've seen Logan have some absolute stinkers in the past. However, for this one, it was just a general case of not the best race. A little bit behind his teammate, did also get the penalty, which wasn't really his fault. But then you look at where he's finished, last of everyone who didn't DNF, and it's got to go down as just a generally under par race. For a rating for Logan, he's getting a 4.5. It's not incredibly awful or anything, it's just a little bit below average, and I just feel that's how his race generally went. On to my 3rd worst driver, and once again I'm going to put out the disclaimer of please don't hate me, because it's Oscar Piastri. Now, honestly, I love Oscar. He's brilliant, not to mention his comments about Lance Stroll after the race. That's a whole other topic that we could discuss for hours on end. However, for this one in Oscar, and especially in the sprint as well, we really saw him struggle with pace compared to Lando. Couple that with their finishing positions, Lando's up there in P2, and Oscar's down there in 8th place. Yes, he did have some damage caused by, you guessed it, Lance Stroll. However, in this one, he was always looking like he was slower than Lando. For a rating for Oscar, he's going to get a 4.5, which to be honest, might even be a little bit generous. He was generally way off of Lando, and we know that now he can be roughly on par, if not only just behind. So for him, I still think it was pretty disappointing as a weekend on the whole. Into my 2nd worst driver then, and I'm going to go with Kevin Magnussen. First half of the race, nothing too special, was out-qualified by his teammate, so was behind, wasn't really doing too much. For me though, this low rating comes from his move, or attempted move I should say, on Yuki Tsunoda. Just after the safety car restart, goes up the inside, has plenty of room, Yuki leaves him a ton of space, and still crashes into him. Just drifts over to the left, tags Yuki's rear right. I've also given him slightly lower marks because you've also knocked the other person out of the race, which I feel like makes it a little bit worse. So for Magnussen in this one, he's going to get a 3.5. It's just generally pretty disappointing. You've ended up right down the back of the field because of that, and that's all there is to say really. Then we get into my worst driver of the Chinese Grand Prix, and there's really no surprises here. It's Lance Stroll. The first half of the race wasn't going awful. Honestly, it genuinely wasn't too bad, and the safety car did help him out a little bit. Was running inside the top 10 and was looking pretty good. Then we get to the safety car, where everyone concertinaed up looking to restart, and Stroll just ploughed into the back of Ricciardo. Don't get me wrong, I can see how it's not fully his fault in the sense of everyone is braking suddenly, but as Oscar Piastri put it, yeah, but no one else crashed into anyone. Plus you couple that with Daniel's post-race interview, and he says how Lance is just looking away from him, which is completely true. On the onboard, he's just looking at the corner, nothing about the car in front. For Lance here, he's going to get a 3. Ultimately, it did also end Daniel's race. It wrecked his one as well, having to come into the pits. There was some nice battling with Magnussen, which was over absolutely nothing. But still, even for Lance Stroll standards, this one wasn't great. Into the top 5 then, and someone who at the start of this year, based on their car's performance, I most definitely didn't think would be here, but it's Esteban Ocon. The Alpine drivers finished this one in 11th place, and when you're in a car like the Alpine, All that matters is where you finish. Being just one place off the points when only really Lance Stroll of the top 10 drivers, if you can call him that, has sort of DNF'd or finished further down, really does show how good of a drive it was on the whole. At the end of the day, you finished one place out of the points, you've beaten your teammate as well, there are a couple of nice if not slightly forceful moves, but generally good racing from Ocon in there, and so I think on the whole it's generally been a good race for him. Rating wise, he's going to be getting a 7. Honestly, 11th place for an Alpine, best result of the season so far. Then we get to my 4th best driver, and I've gone with Charles Leclerc. I talked about how with Carlos Sainz he just generally looked a bit of a ways off of his teammate. With Charles, he looked generally a bit of a ways ahead of his teammate. Couple that with Sainz making mistakes while overtaking, Leclerc had some really nice moves. I'm thinking of George Russell in turn 1 going around the outside to take that place, but on the whole he just looked pretty comfortable. Couple that with a P4 finish, not too far away from Sergio really either, and it's generally a good result. Leclerc in this one, he's also going to get a 7, because don't get me wrong, it's not extremely amazing or anything like that, but generally an above average, really solid drive. Next we get to my 3rd best driver, and I've gone with Nico Hülkenberg. Haas have really been exceeding everybody's expectations this year, and of their 2 drivers, Nico has been far the better one. Look at this one, he's picking up another point, which as I mentioned, 1 or 2 points is realistically all those bottom 5 teams can be going for, and in a crazy race he's kept out of trouble, stayed clean, not got too caught up in the cars ahead of him, and generally just finished well. P10 for Haas, another point on the board, as they look to chase down RB for that 6th place, something I definitely did not expect to be saying this year. But for Hülkenberg in this one, he's going to get a 7.5. As I've mentioned with drivers before, it's just a really solid race and a good result as well, and a 7.5 is roughly what that is. Next up then, we have my 2nd best driver, and there's no real surprises probably with this one, it's Lando Norris. To finish ahead of one of the Red Bulls in a year like this year or arguably last year, especially when Sergio sort of started near you, is a really good result. He's qualified well on the Saturday, raced well on the Sunday, pulled away from Sergio in that last stint as well, absolutely demolished his teammate. It's a really, really top drive from Lando, and honestly was more than he or the team would have expected in this one. For a rating for Lando, he's going to be getting a 9. It's a really good drive, probably his best of the year. It's also his best result and a 2nd place and on the podium as well. Top job from Lando. Then we get on to my 1st place, and honestly there's no surprises, it's Max Verstappen. The question here is, am I going to give him a 10? Now often people say, how was this performance or that performance not a 10 from Verstappen? The answer is, we have races like this, where he was dominant in qualifying, dominant in the race, and to such an extent that he was absolutely untouchable. You look at how he had almost a 20-second lead before those pit stops under the safety car. Then by the end of the race he had a 14-second lead, not to mention the fact that it wasn't even his teammate behind him because he's demolished Sergio by so much. Looked absolutely comfortable, no issues whatsoever, and so for Verstappen he is going to be getting a 10. I don't hand them out too often, but races like this are the reason why. So there you have my race ratings for the 2024 Chinese Grand Prix. As you can see, quite a few in that middle bunch of sort of 5 to 7 in this one. And then as promised, 5 races in, we now get into the averages. As you'd expect, the likes of Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Leclerc, Norris up that top end, and people like Logan Sargent, Daniel Ricciardo, Lance Stroll, and even Lewis Hamilton this season down the bottom end. But anyways, that is all for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have, give the video a thumbs up. Make sure to get yourself subscribed to the channel. But until next time, take care.